Welcome to another deep dive today. And we're going to be exploring the world of better decision making.
Ooh.
Yeah, through the lens of fighter pilots.
Okay, cool.
Our main guide for this journey is a book called The Art of Clear Thinking by Hassard Lee, who is a former fighter pilot.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's a fascinating read. And to help us unpack all these concepts and really dive deep into the book, we have Anna here, who's a professor at University 365 and also an expert on clear thinking.
Hi.
Hi. So the core premise of the book really just boils down to the fact that clear thinking, even under a lot of pressure, is super important in everyday life.
Yeah. You know what I really liked about this book was that the author doesn't just tell us, how to do this. He actually shows us.
Right.
And through all of these, really personal experiences that he had as a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And I really like that he shared a story about this near crash experience early on in his career.
Oh, wow.
Because he didn't really fully grasp power laws and stuff.
And these are mathematical power
Yeah,
laws.
exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's a powerful reminder that these skills are definitely learned. They're not something that you're just born with.
Totally. Yeah.
And sometimes, we learn best through our mistakes.
Oh, for sure. Trial by fire, right?
Exactly.
So speaking of power laws,
Yeah.
right? I think that's something that maybe a lot of our listeners haven't really thought about before. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that idea is and why it's so important for us when we're making decisions?
So, power laws describe relationships where a small change in one thing leads to a disproportionately large change in another thing.
Okay.
So think about compound interest.
Oh, yeah.
If you have a small change in your interest rate, it can make a huge difference over time, right?
Totally.
So the author is saying that understanding power laws is crucial because they often go against our intuition.
So our gut feeling could be wrong.
A lot of times.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so could you give us a specific example?
Yeah, so there's this example in the book that compares fuel efficiency upgrades for a gas guzzling truck versus a more fuel efficient car.
I gotcha. So we're thinking, okay, if we upgrade the car, that's going to be a bigger impact, right?
You would think, right?
Yeah.
But it turns out that because of power laws,
Yeah.
improving that truck's MPG saves way more fuel.
Oh, that's counterintuitive.
It is.
But it makes sense, when you think about the scale of the improvement. It's
Exactly.
a much bigger jump.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we start thinking in terms of these power laws?
Well, one way is to just, look for areas where small changes could have outsized effects.
Okay.
So, it might be investing in your skills or, building relationships or even improving a key process at work.
Okay, so it's about kind of finding those pressure points.
Yeah,
Where you can get the most bang for your buck, so to speak.
exactly.
Okay, cool. And so in the book, Lee kind of gives us this decision-making framework,
He does.
right?
Yeah, so he calls it the ACE helix.
Okay, I love that.
I know, right? It's catchy.
It's very catchy. And so it stands for assess, choose, execute.
And so you can apply that to any decision, big or small.
So it's kind of like a universal framework.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the first step is assess,
Yeah.
which is all about understanding the situation that you're actually facing, right?
Yeah, so he compares it to how a pilot needs to keep flying the plane even when they're in an emergency?
Oh, right. So you can't just freeze
You can't just freeze.
because something crazy's happening.
You can't ignore the basic controls just because something unexpected happens.
You got to maintain control even when everything's chaotic.
Exactly. And that starts with, a clear assessment of the situation.
Okay, so you have to know what's going on before you can actually make a decision about it.
Right. And to really highlight this point, he discusses that really tragic Air France Flight 4447 crash.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about that.
Yeah, so the pilots, they encountered some unusual weather and instrument malfunctions.
Okay, so things were starting to go wrong.
Yeah, and because they had an incomplete assessment of the situation, they misjudged a stall and they lost control of the aircraft.
Oh, wow.
So, the story really emphasizes the importance of really taking the time to assess the situation.
To understand it.
Yeah, before you jump into action.
Wow, so this is like a real life or death situation.
Yeah.
Where having a clear assessment really could have made all the difference.
Exactly. And that's why the choose phase of the ACE helix is super critical because it's not just about reacting to the situation.
Right.
It's about consciously selecting the best course of action based on the assessment that you just did.
So it's very deliberate.
It is?
Okay. And that kind of reminds me of the story in the book about the mission in Afghanistan,
Yes.
where Lee's training just kind of kicked in and he was able to make a really complex decision very, very quickly.
Yes, in like a super high pressure situation.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so he was tasked with providing air support to Army Rangers who were under fire.
Okay, so already things are intense.
Yeah, super intense. And it was like, really complex terrain, low visibility, limited fuel and ammunition.
Oh, wow. So, like, everything's against him.
Everything is against him. And because of his training, he was able to make this like split-second decision
Wow.
to do a really complex strafing run.
Okay, so this is like a maneuver that probably looks impossible on paper,
Yeah.
but because he had this training, he was able to just do it.
Yeah, and like save the day, basically.
Wow.
It shows the power of a solid decision-making framework that's been adapted for like totally unpredictable situations.
So it's not just about like learning the framework in a textbook.
Right.
It's about being able to apply it when things are going crazy.
Exactly.
So he was basically able to like merge his academic understanding with his gut instinct,
Yeah.
and it created this like really amazing outcome.
It does speak to the power of training and preparation,
Yeah.
but it's not about becoming like a superhero or anything.
Right.
It's about building a mental framework and skills to make clear and effective decisions.
Even when things are really tough.
Yeah, when the stakes are high.
Yeah. And that's something that I think we can all benefit from learning about, even if we're not, fighter pilots,
Right.
because we all have to make tough decisions in our lives.
Oh, do.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, are there specific techniques that we can, like, borrow from fighter pilot training
Yeah.
to kind of help us in our everyday lives?
There are, and the author explores a bunch of them in the book.
Okay.
One that really stands out is this idea of chair flying.
Chair flying. Okay. I'd never heard of that before.
It's super interesting.
Right.
And it's essentially like mentally rehearsing for these really stressful situations.
Oh, so it's like a mental simulation.
Exactly.
Okay.
So like by visualizing different scenarios
Okay.
and thinking through like how you would respond,
Gotcha.
you can actually build mental muscle memory.
So your brain's actually getting trained,
It is.
even though you're not physically doing anything.
Yes. Exactly. And that's really cool because then, it can help you improve your ability to make quick decisions under pressure.
Okay. That's awesome. And I think that's particularly relevant to like our listeners,
Yeah.
because they're the learners, right? They're the ones who are always trying to, level up their skills
Yes.
and knowledge. And so being able to feel in control
Yeah.
of a situation,
Yeah.
even when there's like a ton of information coming at them,
Yes.
is a really valuable skill.
Definitely.
Awesome. So what are some other techniques?
Well, he also talks about the importance of fast forecasting.
Okay, what is that?
So fast forecasting is a technique for quickly assessing the expected value of different options when you have to make a decision.
Okay, so it's kind of like a quick and dirty way to figure out,
Yeah.
okay, if I do this,
What's going to happen?
this is going to happen.
Yeah. And he uses this example of Google's founders.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Big names.
Big names. And they almost missed out on that groundbreaking backrub algorithm
Yeah.
because they underestimated its power. Yeah.
So they didn't forecast that it would be so powerful.
I didn't.
Okay, so this idea of fast forecasting can kind of help us to...
Prevent decision paralysis
Okay, yeah.
and allow for action even when you don't have all the information.
Right, because sometimes you don't have time to wait for all the information.
Exactly. And that's a really common challenge for learners. They want all the data before they make a choice, but sometimes that's just not possible.
Yeah.
So fast forecasting kind of encourages you to just make a calculated bet,
Right.
with the information that you have available.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, doing nothing is just as risky as making the wrong decision.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Inaction can be just as bad as like making the wrong decision sometimes.
definitely.
Okay, so it's like this delicate balance
It is.
of figuring out like how much information is enough
Yeah,
to make a decision
exactly.
and being okay with not having all of it.
Exactly.
Okay. And I think this is something that is super relevant in today's world, where everything is moving so fast.
So fast.
And there's so much information coming at us all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, we need to be able to make decisions quickly.
We do.
And so it's kind of like this meta skill almost,
Yeah.
being able to decide like, okay, I have enough information, I'm good to go.
Yeah, and it actually ties into another key theme in the book.
Okay, that's that.
The importance of prioritizing.
Prioritizing.
That-
Okay, so how does that relate to clear thinking?
So the author argues that the ability to prioritize and then act decisively under pressure is really, really crucial.
Okay.
And to illustrate this, he shares the story about a suspicious truck incident.
Oh, I know, right?
This sounds intense. Yeah, so it took place at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan.
Okay.
So, he was there and the situation was super ambiguous
Yeah.
and he had very limited information.
There's not a lot to go on.
Not a lot to go on, but he still had to, assess the risk, make a decision, and then act.
Even though he didn't have all the information.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so this is a case where it sounds like he really had to trust his gut
He did.
and make the best call that he could with the information that he had.
Yeah, and that's a skill that is honed through experience and practice.
Right.
But it's also about having a really clear understanding of your goals and your values.
Okay, so that kind of helps you to filter out the noise a little bit.
Yeah.
Even when things are crazy, you know what's important to you.
Exactly.
Okay, so that kind of guides your decision making.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. And that kind of leads us to, one of the things that I found really interesting in the book was this idea of how to turn your experiences into like actionable knowledge.
Yes.
Right? Because like we all have experiences, but sometimes we don't really learn from them.
We don't.
Right? So what are some of the things that Lee talks about in the book that can help us to like actually learn from those experiences?
Yeah, so he really emphasizes this idea of prioritizing concepts over memorizing things by rote.
Oh, okay. So it's not just about like stuffing your brain full of facts.
Exactly.
It's about understanding the underlying principles.
Exactly.
Okay.
So he's saying that it's really important to understand the why behind the what.
Okay. I like that.
Wait,
The why behind the what.
Yeah, and this actually perfectly aligns with University 365's philosophy.
Oh, cool. We'll have to dig into that a little bit more later.
We will.
But I love this idea that, it's not about just memorizing stuff. It's about understanding how it all connects
Yes.
and how to actually apply it to real-world situations.
Right, and he also highlights the importance of learning through simulations
Okay.
and diverse learning tools.
So it's about creating like an immersive learning experience?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. And he even talks about the power of incorporating technologies like flight simulators.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so, not just the ones on your laptop, but the ones that are like full-blown high-fidelity VR experiences.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's really about finding the tools that work best for you
Exactly.
and then like actively engaging with the material.
Yeah.
So it's not just about passively reading a textbook.
No.
It's about getting in there and like getting your hands dirty.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like he's advocating for like a more dynamic, learner-centered approach to education.
It is.
Okay, and that really aligns with like the whole idea of like the learner persona,
Yeah.
right? Who
Yeah.
wants to be in control of their
Yeah.
learning
Yeah.
and wants to be able to like explore and experiment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I'm excited to dive into some of these ideas a little more in the next segment.
Me too.
But before we go to break, I just want to quickly touch on this idea of like creativity,
Yes.
because Lee actually highlights that in the book too.
Yes. He dedicates an entire section to it.
Okay, so why is creativity so important?
Well, he argues that in a world where, we're increasingly reliant on data and algorithms,
Yeah.
being able to come up with creative solutions,
Okay.
especially unconventional ones, is more vital than ever.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and he uses some really compelling examples from military history
Oh, cool.
to really illustrate this point.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so he talks about Operation Desert Storm
Okay.
and this concept of effects-based operations.
Okay. Not familiar with that.
So the military didn't just rely on brute force.
Wow.
They actually carefully analyzed the Iraqi military's systems
Okay.
to identify key vulnerabilities.
Gotcha. So they're being very strategic.
They are.
Yeah.
And so they came up with all these creative strategies to exploit these vulnerabilities.
Okay.
So, for example, they used helicopters to take out these really critical radar sites.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this opened up a corridor for a surprise air assault.
Wow. So they're using creativity to overcome like a seemingly impossible challenge.
They are.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a really brilliant and unexpected tactic
Yeah.
that caught the Iraqis totally off guard.
Wow. So this idea of creativity can really be applied to like so many different areas of our lives.
Yeah. Yes.
Not just military strategy, but also like business technology.
Yeah,
Even just like personal problem solving.
absolutely.
Okay, cool. And this actually reminds me of like a more modern example,
Oh, yeah.
which is Ukraine's use of social media
Yes.
to gain international support.
Very effective.
Right.
Very effective.
So they were able to use like this seemingly non-military tool
Yes.
to achieve a strategic advantage.
Right.
Wow. So it's like thinking outside the box
Yeah.
can really lead to some really innovative solutions.
It can.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
But when we come back, we're going to be diving into some more of these practical applications of clear thinking
Sounds good.
and how you can actually start using these ideas in your own life.
I'm excited.
So stay tuned.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to our deep dive into the art of clear thinking. We've been talking about how to make better decisions, especially when we're under pressure. And we've been using, Hazard Lee's experiences as a fighter pilot to kind of guide us along the way.
Right.
So before the break, we were chatting about the importance of like a learner-centered approach to education.
Yes.
And I'd love to kind of dig into that a little bit more.
Okay.
How does that connect to like Lee's book and also like University 365's approach to teaching?
So one of the key takeaways from the book is that like effective learning isn't about just force-feeding information.
Right.
It's about really empowering individuals
Okay.
to like engage, actively experiment, and make connections like on their own.
Okay, so it's about giving them the tools
Yeah.
to learn.
Yeah. And he repeatedly says that true mastery comes from understanding the why behind the what.
Oh, I like that.
Right.
The why behind the what.
Yeah. And that really aligns with University 365's philosophy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because you can memorize like facts and figures.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand like the underlying principles,
Mm.
you're going to be lost when you encounter a new situation.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like the difference between following a recipe
Okay.
and understanding the chemistry of baking.
Okay. Yeah.
So, if you just follow the recipe, you might be able to bake a decent cake.
Right.
But if you understand like how each ingredient works
Yeah.
and why you need to use it,
Yeah.
then you can adapt and improvise
Get creative.
and create something totally unique.
Yeah. So it's about taking that knowledge and really owning it.
Owning it, yeah.
So how does University 365 like actually incorporate this into their teaching approach?
So we really believe in creating a learning environment that's both challenging and supportive.
Okay.
We don't just like throw information at our students.
Right.
We encourage them to ask questions, experiment, and even make mistakes.
It's like a safe space to learn.
Yeah, and we use a variety of teaching methods.
Okay.
For, like simulations, case studies, group discussions.
So they can get like a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah, to connect theory to practice and develop their critical thinking skills.
Okay, that's cool. And so that actually kind of reminds me of another thing that Lee talks about in his book, which is creativity.
Yes,
And he actually dedicates an entire section to this.
he does.
So why do you think creativity is so important?
Well, he argues that in a world where, we're increasingly reliant on data and algorithms,
Right.
being able to generate creative solutions,
Mm-hmm.
especially unconventional ones.
Yeah, outside the box thinking.
Yeah, exactly. As like more vital than ever before.
Okay.
And he uses some really compelling examples from military history to like illustrate this point.
Could you share one with us?
Yeah, so he talks about Operation Desert Storm
Okay.
and this concept of effects-based operations.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that.
So basically, the military didn't just rely on like brute force.
Okay.
They actually carefully analyzed the Iraqi military systems
Okay.
to identify key vulnerabilities.
So it's a very strategic approach.
Very strategic. And then they came up with these like really creative strategies to exploit those vulnerabilities.
Okay.
So for example, they used helicopters to take out these critical radar sites.
Oh, wow.
And this opened up a corridor for like a surprise air assault.
Oh, wow. So they're using creativity to like overcome a seemingly impossible challenge.
Exactly. And it was like super effective.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So this idea that creativity can be applied not just to military strategy,
Right.
but also to business technology,
Mm.
personal problem solving.
Yeah, all sorts of things.
Yeah, okay. And it actually reminds me of a more modern example,
Oh, yeah.
which is Ukraine's use of social media
Very effective.
Right.
Very effective.
to gain international support.
Yeah.
So they were able to use like this seemingly non-military tool
Right.
to gain a strategic advantage.
Exactly.
It's like thinking outside the box can really lead to some amazing solutions.
We can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. And it kind of brings us back to this idea of lifelong learning,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So how do you encourage students at University 365 to like cultivate their creativity and keep learning even after they've graduated?
So we foster a learning culture that extends beyond the classroom.
Okay.
So we offer all sorts of things like extracurricular activities, workshops, guest speaker events.
Keep them engaged.
Yeah, and expose them to different perspectives and inspire them to think creatively.
Okay, so it's not just about the coursework.
It's not just about the coursework.
It's about the whole
the
experience.
whole experience. And we also encourage them to do independent research projects
Okay.
and pursue their own passions.
So like finding what they're really interested in.
Exactly, whether it's starting a business or writing a novel or learning a new language.
So it's about nurturing a love of learning
Yes,
that extends beyond just getting a degree.
exactly. We believe that learning is a lifelong journey,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to give our students the tools and resources to like really embrace that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties into this concept of mental toughness, which Lee also talks about in his book.
Yeah, he really dives into how stress can impair our judgment
Mm-hmm.
and how important it is to develop mental resilience.
Right, because we've all been in those situations where we're stressed out
Yeah,
and we can't think straight.
exactly.
So Lee actually shares an anecdote about a student pilot
Mm-hmm.
who starts making like simple mistakes
Yes.
after encountering a minor stressor.
Yeah, it's crazy how even a little bit of stress
Right.
can really mess with our decision-making abilities.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a good reminder that we need to be proactive about developing those strategies for managing stress and building our mental resilience.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that Lee recommends?
So he actually talks about chair flying again,
Oh, yeah.
which we discussed earlier, and how it can be really effective for mentally preparing for these stressful situations.
Right. So visualizing those challenging scenarios
Yeah.
and kind of rehearsing how you would respond.
Yeah, like training your mind to stay calm and focused under pressure.
Okay. So it's like building mental muscle memory for decision making.
Exactly. And this is a technique that anyone can use,
Yeah.
regardless of what they do for a living or their life circumstances.
It's a universally applicable tool.
Yeah.
And so this concept of mental toughness is something that I think is especially relevant for our listeners,
Yes.
the learners, right?
Yeah.
Because they're constantly pushing themselves to learn new things and grow.
Yes. Always trying to improve their skills and knowledge.
So being able to deal with that pressure
Yeah.
and stay focused is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that we actually weave into our curriculum at University 365.
Oh, cool. How so?
So we don't just focus on like academic knowledge, we
Mhm.
also help students develop their emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and resilience.
So it's like a holistic approach
Yes.
to education.
Exactly.
And so that really ties back to the core message of the book, right? Like it's about developing the mental frameworks and the skills to make better decisions,
Mm.
navigate challenges, and ultimately live a more fulfilling life.
Well said. It's about taking those fighter pilot principles
Yeah.
and applying them to your own unique journey.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful message for our listeners to take away from this deep dive.
Yeah.
And before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more thing from the book, which is the importance of turning experience into knowledge,
Yes.
right? So we've all had experiences,
Yeah.
but sometimes we don't actually learn from them.
We don't.
So what are some of the things that Lee talks about that can help us to do that?
So he emphasizes that learning from experience is crucial,
Okay.
but it's not enough to just like go through the motions.
Yeah.
You have to reflect on those experiences,
Okay.
identify patterns, extract lessons, and then actually apply those lessons to future situations.
So it's about taking the time to really think about what happened.
Yes, he calls this the ODE loop.
The OGI loop.
Okay. Yeah. It stands for observe, orient, decide, and act.
Oh, so it's like a cycle
It is.
of learning and improvement.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's a process that we actually encourage at University 365.
Oh, cool. How do you do that?
So through reflective exercises, personalized feedback, and mentorship programs.
So you're giving students the opportunity to really like process those experiences.
Yeah, we want them to be active participants in their learning journey,
Yeah.
constantly seeking feedback, analyzing their experiences, and refining their approach.
Okay, so it's about developing that growth mindset
Yes,
where you're always looking for ways to improve.
exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, Anna, this has been such an enlightening conversation.
it has.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface of all the amazing insights that Lee shares in his book.
We have, but it's been a pleasure sharing these ideas with you.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to continue our discussion in the next segment.
Me too.
But before we go, I just want to say to our listeners, we'll be right back, and we're going to be diving deeper into the practical applications of these concepts
Okay.
and how you can start using them in your own life.
Sounds good.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.
Welcome back to our deep dive.
You know, we've been exploring how to make better decisions under pressure, and we've been using Hazard Lee's experiences as a fighter pilot as our guide.
Right.
So for this final part of our conversation, I'd love to like shift our focus a little bit to like the practical applications of all of this.
Okay.
What's like one key takeaway that our listeners can start implementing in their lives right now?
Well, I think one of the most powerful tools that the author gives us is the ACE Helix itself,
Okay.
the Assess, Choose, Execute framework.
Right. And we talked about that earlier.
Yeah, it seems really straightforward.
Yeah.
But just consciously applying it, even in like really small situations, can be transformative.
And I think that's something that's really easy to overlook.
Yeah.
Like, we often make decisions kind of on autopilot.
Without really thinking through those steps.
Yeah.
So can you give us an example of how we can use the ACE Helix in a very practical way?
Sure. So imagine you're feeling totally overwhelmed
Right.
with your to-do list.
Been there.
Right. So instead of just like reacting to everything.
Right, just like randomly picking things.
Exactly. Take a moment to assess the situation,
Okay.
what actually needs to get done today,
Okay.
and then choose the most important task
Based on your goals,
based on your goals exactly, and then execute it.
do it.
Just focus on that one thing and minimize distractions.
Okay, so just that simple act of like consciously applying that framework
Yeah,
can make a big difference
it can.
because it brings in this level of intentionality
Yes.
that I think a lot of us are missing.
Yeah, we're not really thinking about our decisions.
We're just kind of reacting.
Yeah.
And so by using this framework, it forces us to slow down a little bit.
Yeah, and think things through.
Okay, cool. And
Yeah.
the more you use it, the better you get at it.
Exactly. It becomes more natural.
It's like building a mental muscle.
It is.
And so clear thinking isn't just about like big life decisions.
right.
It's about like applying these principles to everything.
To everything.
Yeah.
So even something as simple as like choosing what to eat for dinner
Yeah.
can benefit from the ACE Helix.
So instead of just like mindlessly grabbing the first thing you see in the fridge,
Yeah.
you actually stop and you think about it.
You pause.
Okay, what are my options?
Yeah.
What are my goals?
What are my health goals?
And then you make a choice.
Yes.
Okay, so it's about taking control
Yes.
of those decisions.
Big or small?
Okay, and this aligns really well with like University 365's philosophy,
It does.
right?
Yeah.
So how else does University 365 incorporate these principles of clear thinking into its approach to teaching?
So our personalized lifelong learning philosophy really reflects this.
Okay.
We give our students tools like the Feynman method, which we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
to help them really understand the concepts.
Right? By explaining them in their own words.
Exactly. And we also promote Teach and Share video podcasts,
Cool.
which really mirrors that active engagement that the author talks about in his book.
Yeah, so it's not just about passively consuming information.
No,
It's about actually doing something with it.
doing something with it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And you also mentioned earlier that you offer personalized coaching and mentorship.
We do?
And that's another way that you're kind of helping students to like reflect on their experiences.
Yes, and extract those valuable lessons and apply them to future challenges.
Yeah, so it's like that OODA loop in action.
It is.
It's about constantly seeking feedback, analyzing your experiences, and refining your approach.
Yes.
Okay, so it's about developing that growth mindset
That's it.
where you're always looking for ways to improve.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Anna, this has been such an incredible deep dive
It has.
into the world of clear thinking.
Yeah, I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
We have. There's
Yeah.
so much more to explore.
There is, but it's been a pleasure sharing these ideas with you.
Likewise, and I'm so grateful for your expertise and insights.
Oh, you're welcome.
And for our listeners, we encourage you to pick up a copy of The Art of Clear Thinking by Hazard Lee.
Yes, it's a great book.
It's a fascinating and practical guide to becoming a more effective and confident decision maker.
Absolutely.
So until next time, keep learning and keep diving deep.